So in the language archive, the real world statistic that the kind of thing is based off of is that every 2 weeks, roughly, a language ceases to exist, whether
Hmm.
that's because of assimilation things or just like a natural disaster kind of taking out an entire
Yeah.
language in its
Yeah.
wreckage, right? Which we get laughing about, but it's really
Yeah.
yikes. Yeah. But the one of the languages that's kind of a center of focus in the show is the language called Esperanto, if I pronounce that with any sort of flavor.
Yeah,
And do you want to tell us the history? You probably know this a lot better than I do.
sure. I will give it my best shot. So Esperanto is a language created by this man named Zamenhof, and he was kind of pre-World War II, and he had really been noticing the lack of communication and collaboration and peace between people in general and humanity, and he just took it upon himself to to create a language that he wanted the entire world to speak. It was
Mm,
kind of this his goal to create a world language, in hopes of creating some sort of unity, because his whole thing was that he felt that maybe the reason there was so much conflict between countries and between people was
mm.
because they all spoke different languages, so no one could communicate with the same level of understanding.
Yeah.
So he set out to create this new language, and he based it off of Latin in a way, called it like a new Latin.
Mm.
But he wanted it to have like very minimal rules, because he felt that part of like the barrier to learning languages, I mean, as if you've taken any language course, there's a lot of
Yeah,
rules, and conjugations and all these things. So he wanted to make a very simplistic language, that had just like a set of core words and then a couple different endings. And he set out to like have it be this universal language. It was going to be the language of the UN at one
yeah.
point. And then it ultimately faced a lot of backlash during World War II. Hitler like outlawed it and killed anyone who spoke it. And
Yeah.
so, had some trials and tribulations, but it's still widely spoken. It's a course on Duolingo if you want to take it.
Yeah.
But like I had never heard of it prior to this play. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I think there's like 2 million speakers still.
Yeah, like people that know about it or have studied it in some capacity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
It's crazy.
I also had never heard of this before, and I had some church members come up to me, um, talking, kind of excited for the show, saying that this was a language that they were introduced to in private school, like,
Wow.
back in the day, like, because there was kind of a build in certain, like, parts of the country that were like, "Oh, this is gonna become
Yeah.
the native language, like, this is where we're headed," right? And then,
Yeah.
obviously, the World War II connection that you kinda mentioned, especially with, Zamenhof, I think he has, like, a little bit of Jewish background
Yes.
also,
Yeah. He's
and
Jewish.
there's this sort of dream sequence in the show, right, where he exists and he asks about his family, and it's kinda referred to that in World War II, his family kinda got the brunt end of it because of his contributions to world peace in a
Right.
different manner than World War II
Yeah.
was headed.
I think
Um,
it's actually super cool that, yeah, that's a very factual part of the show.
yeah,
And it's cool to have that kind of juxtaposition between a really real language and like
yeah,
very historical situation with the made up language at the same
yeah,
time. But they're kind of treated like they're both
yeah.
totally real languages
And we were
in
we
the
were talk
show.
we were talking a bit with our dialect
Yes.
coach, dialect designer, Leah Johnson, and how so Julia Cho has written in the instructor of Esperanto to come from a German background,
Hmm.
which I think is a very nice, subtle, sort of restorative element in the show of, like, knowing where Zamenhof and, Esperanto kind of ends up in the course of history and how it takes a
Yep.
massive hit during World War II, and then to have a German instructor be the one teaching this language is very, very interesting that
Yeah.
I just wanna mention on here in case people come to the show, and
Yeah.
I think that's a detail we can miss, but it's so powerful, I think.
Yeah, there are a ton of like little nuggets in the show, I think,
Yeah.
for different language things. Yeah, and there's Esperanto conventions to this
Yeah.
day. If you see the show and you're super inspired and then you become a follower. You can go to one.
Yeah. Get your tickets now
Yeah.
for our show, but also, an
But also
Esperanto
the
convention
convention.
if you want.